It is a pleasure to meet you at this opportunity to address a very important issue concern the entire world countries, which is government debt and sovereign credit rating of each country. If I take United States as an example, these days, in previous effort, Congress and federal government, they made the Budget Control Act 2011 to curb or to decrease the federal budget deficit. The effort continued to what you are listening to these days on what concern budget sequestration. Budget sequestration, it does get on the similar direction to their effort to decrease the federal budget deficit. It takes me to a very, very important part on economy structure to any geographical area and United States on specific. Factors of production. To work factors of production more efficient, it does on certain level if you have land, labor, organization, and capital structure. When you come to regulate or on financial regulations on a specific, it does fit on organization. You bring financial legislation to organize between the existence of a business or institution work within commodities markets or financial markets, or they work on those areas, direct or related. In other words, any financial legislation it does direct existence of level of growth forward. That is the any objective to any financial legislations or any legislators to get the growth forward. If the legislation decrease the speed of growth, it does not work on the objective, which means availabilities plays a major evaluation on any legislation or legislator effort to curb any type of spending or deficit, federal budget deficit or any other deficit. Let me just put the framework. You have a factors of production, you need to work it more efficient to keep growth forward or to increase growth. Good. Legislations comes to on what relate organization, an important part of the factors of production, to focus on how to keep growth forward within land, labor, organization itself, and capital structure. I'll have two examples to just to keep on the subject, and the main objective is growth and decrease the deficits of federal budget or any other area related to business or to government agencies or government sponsored enterprise. And I have two examples. Government sponsored enterprise in general, and Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae, and home loan banks as an example. Home loan banks loan institutions, about 12 institutions. Since 2008, if you hear about the conservatorship of the Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, 2008 to present moment, it became it relates to Treasury Department. It's a very, very important question to their owner, Federal Reserve Districts and Treasury Department Secretary. What's inside their monetary policy suitcase, financial policy suitcase, when they visit Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, or which is the government-sponsored enterprise, it's a part, and another part I can mention any industry, and let me just focus on retail industry, and I'll select Safeway company, if it's well-known company. If their owner, Federal Reserve Chairman and Federal Reserve Districts Presidents, and his owner, the new Treasury Secretary, and previous former Treasury Secretaries since 2008 to present moment, Mr. Paulson, Mr. Timothy Geithner, and the present Treasury Secretary, Jack Lew. If they visit Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, government-sponsored enterprise, or Safeway, what's in their monetary policy suitcase, financial policy suitcase to those government-sponsored enterprises, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and Safeway. What does increase their growth? What does bring their objectives of growth forward? What's on the monetary policy and the financial policy to bring an immediate enhancement to their objectives of growth? You have part of the what's on the conservatorship of the Treasury Department, and you have retail industry business. Now you can apply any other department store or any other, but what's on their monetary policy and financial policy to keep their growth forward is very important, and it does take to how to work factors of production more efficient. Legislators related to economics, law, and anything related to administrative science, administration, business administration, or any other thing related to administrative direction. What's on their policies to get the growth forward? Let me become more specific on what concerns how to work factors of production more efficient. There are two things relates to growth cycle of any government institutions or government corporation or state corporation or private corporation or company. They call it merger and acquisition. Through any business growth cycle or any government corporation or government sponsored enterprise, they have a growth cycle, merger and acquisition. It does refer to level of growth. There are several levels on their growth cycles. When acquisition comes, either to increase growth forward or to decrease certain level of things that does not get the there is an equilibrium cost point between revenues and expenditure. It gets into adjusted. Similarities with merger and acquisition you hear these days, the United Airlines and American Airlines, they merged to bring a bigger airline company to get their growth forward, to keep their growth forward. It is a level that takes growth forward. What I'm trying to point at, any legislation supposed to fit on these areas. It does read on these areas to get the growth forward. Let me become more specific. Any merger and acquisitions works through commodities markets, financial markets. Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, they receive about $100 billion on their budget, plus cheap finance. It came on a question to His Honor, the Treasury Secretary, the testimony of his nomination from the on the Congress Banking and Senate Banking and Housing and Urban Affairs Committee, and you have the minute on the internet available. They ask His Honor about the cheap finance, and he referred to question 30B, which takes the question to Federal Reserve districts. Well, it's both. It's more related to Treasury Department because you know, the conservatorship of the Fannie Mae Freddie Mac it's on the Treasury Department, but Federal Reserve districts, they have their part on the financial policy and the monetary policy, and that's why I referred to their visits. If they visit today any of those businesses, what's in their suitcases, monetary policy and financial policy, to bring an immediate enhancement to an important part in the economic structure of the United States. It does reflect on geographical areas, level of geographical areas, cities, states, and the national level. And it takes me back to a very important area. It should take the President of the United States of America, His Honor, attention, and their honor, the Congress related committees on finance, financial services, and banking and housing and urban affairs committee on the Senate and House of Representatives. Economy structure enhancement supposed to take their immediate attention, and the main focus to any businesses, if it's a government corporation, if it's a state corporation, if it's a private company or corporation, they work on commodities markets and they work on financial markets. Cheap finance, which was the focus on the question addressed on the testimony to His Honor the Treasury Secretary, it does relate to commodities markets. Securities is a commodity. It's not just a financial tool. It is a commodity, and it is a financial tool. You know, the commodities has goods and services, but it relates to financial markets because it does relate to both. If you notice, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, their growth is not getting forward. It does reflect on year 2011. Their annual report, it does refer to slow growth. If you remember, I mentioned on a business session, the entire $8 trillion of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac can be cleared on a very specified steps. I hope it gets the immediate attention of their honor, President of the United States and the Congress, and I'm very sure state governors, sooner or later, they become part of the situation. They pay taxes on a situation, not part of it. It's not a critic, but it's a reality. Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae, and the home loan banks, these 12 financial institutions, they're supposed to become well related, well connected to through the entire states. But reality says the state governors and the state cities, they get more financial obligations from not just from government-sponsored enterprises I just mentioned, but from a number of things. The federal budget deficit, it does fit on number of necessities, and that's why any kind of cuts, it does reflect on the cost of goods and services, and this is the main focus. The federal budget or budget sequestration, it does lead to a gradual increase on trade deficit of the geographical area. Each state and the balance of trade of the country. If it didn't find forward growth on gross domestic product, which comes on a simple equation: income, savings, investment. In other words, there is a necessity: income, consumption, savings, investment. It does their work or their planned any planned legislations. It fits on the consumption or spending and the deficit, and it does get to savings if there is any kind of saving. If not, the financial alternatives track, financial alternative cycle track, and the real income cycle track. They create part of the finance to fit on the investment, not to get back to the consumption. What is happening? The income equation brings consumption, spending. If you take the federal budget on the equation, it does get to a savings to find yes, pardon me, find another way of finance if there is no finance from the available income or allocated budget. And the equilibrium cost between revenues and expenditure brings negative, as it happens in Fannie and Freddie Mac. They get to financial alternatives. Legislations not giving these areas enough attention, and it does need their attention. The Dodd-Frank, Wall Street, and the Consumer Protection Act should come after to at least to another acts to organize, gets to the factors of production, to organize what relates to commodities markets and financial markets. It does exempted Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and put more narrowed part of the growth on diversified investments industry, which brings Wall Street and companies there. It's supposed to have at least two acts related to the financial industry and commodities markets, or to financial markets and commodities markets, to bring a number of things not available at this moment. But when the act came, it came for specific objectives. It's clear. But the availabilities, it does bring negative impacts more than positive impacts. And that's why, since if you just get to the FDIC, take over financial institutions since year 2008, 2009, 2010, 2011, 2012, and even at the beginning of year 2013. There are more financial institutions became part of FDIC take over financial institutions. That's supposed to happen. It means economic activities not enough to speed the financial services to fit on those financial institutions. In other words, contract and contracting. In other words, the more than 226 main and derivative industry is not working as supposed to. And this is there are a number of solutions. If you remember, I mentioned the commodities markets and financial markets enhancement on what concerns cities. It brings $200 trillion growth. If you remember, $1 trillion total clearance of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac debt. if you remember, an immediate $26 trillion on the financial industry, only on the financial industry. Immediate growth. Within 24 hours it becomes available, it clears the entire national debt, it clears the entire federal budget deficit. Just more focus on how to work factors of production more efficient. And it does bring much of comfort to businesses on what concern merger and acquisition and other ways of adjustment on businesses. And you remember there is an effort on the solutions brings between 4 to 6 growth cycles to back any financial institutions, any company at any financial difficulties through the entire states and their cities. It is available on the business solution. And if you remember, the industrial development relates to trade transformation. It does bring not less than another $200 trillion growth. In other words, any effort on federal, on budget sequestration supposed to manage other areas, not just the legislators or legislations to curb spending. It's supposed to manage another area, encourage growth on commodities markets, financial markets, and necessary steps to keep the growth on those areas forward. If you remember my previous message, the state of California has more than 482 financial networks, not existed at this moment, and they apply through the entire states, the municipalities. This is just part of more other financial networks, and those financial networks, they have financial tools. These are the grounds that brings or increase or manage the flow of contracts and contracting every day. If it's not existed, it means millions or billions of contracts and contracting it's not there. States not getting benefit from those growth, and it is an indirect signal to the between $2 trillion to $12 trillion growth on city of Los Angeles, and there are about 6 other cities in a similar situation just on the state of California. That means the state of California is subject to more than $20 trillion growth on their state budget, and it keeps growing. And at this moment, I hear the news as anybody else. Detroit became on the state emergency of the state of Michigan. Well, there is, on what concerns cities, there is $2 trillion, not less than $2 trillion to city of Detroit growth on their present budget. It's a $2 trillion growth. Solutions available anytime, any moment, and there are about 400 cities in the United States, or those cities subject to $2 trillion or more on their budget, on their city's budget. Getting back to the main focus, if legislations does not recognize economic structure enhancement on what concern commodities markets, financial markets, it does bring a gradual negative impact on existing commodities markets and financial markets, which increases the marginal utility and marginal cost of each unit on goods and services, which brings, which increases the existing trade deficit, the balance of trade, and it works on a gradual increase. If attention didn't get to commodities markets, financial markets, and economic structure enhancement on specific. And I hope I get more video message to brief pardon me, more directions of growth in different areas. Thank you very much, and happy New Year. March started, and I think much of growth to come and much of good news to come to national level, state level, and cities level, and businesses level. It is very important, the financial authorities, to have their structure of solutions available, their effort and an additional effort available upon their request. The Federal Reserve Districts, Treasury Department, and the financial authorities in U.S. Congress, Senate, and House of Representatives, and His Honor the President of the United States. And the other countries similarities applied. The chart of the geographical map of the government debt and sovereign credit rating, it does brief part of those features on each country. Thank you very much, and I'll see you on the next message.